Welcome to Modern Learning on the Air. I'm your host, Jeff Brown. Today we're diving into the evolving landscape of hybrid learning as we begin this year. I'm joined by Jennifer Hofmann, founder of Instinct Training, and Connie Malamed, a renowned learning experience designer, consultant, and author. Welcome, Jennifer and Connie.
Thanks for having me, Jeff. A little bit about me. I run a community called Mastering Instructional Design, and that's where I teach everything related to instructional design, plus instructional design courses. And I also publish the eLearning Coach website and podcast, where I have 80-something podcasts and over 350 articles about instructional design. I guess I'm an instructional design nerd.
And Jennifer, why don't you introduce yourself?
I'm Jennifer Hofmann, founder of Instinct Training, and I've been in the virtual learning industry since it started back in the late 1990s. I actually wrote the first book on the topic of how to teach and design in the virtual classroom. It was called the Synchronous Trainer's Survival Guide back in 2000. And so I've been working in that field ever since.
Jennifer, let's start off. Let's give our audience the definition of what hybrid learning actually is.
That's really important that we define it right up front, because just like everything in training and development, it means different things to different people. But what we're talking about today, hybrid delivery, hybrid training, that's when we have a live session that's delivered to both in-person learners and remote learners at the same time. Now, the content treatment is the same for everybody. The delivery is the same for all learners. They've all got the same instructor. And so that's the definition of hybrid, but I want to say that we can't just leave it at that. When we're defining this, we need to look at a lot of other things. We need to think about what cultures are involved in that hybrid, what languages, what time zones, what devices are people using? Because I could be online on an iPhone or online on a full-end computer. We could be in person with a big group and the facilitator in front of us, or the facilitator could be remote. So there's a lot of different nuances to what hybrid is about. Mm-hmm. At the very basic, we're talking about people in a live classroom and also people online. But just remember, it's bigger than that.
Okay. Well, with that being said, Jennifer, how have you seen hybrid learning evolve over the past few years? And, are there any key trends that are shaping its future as we begin 2025?
Yeah, I think that we've been going towards this hybrid format for years and years, where there was a gradual move towards virtualization of content and trying to get information online. Connie and I can tell you, going back 25 years, that, by the end of this year, 80% of our content is going to be online. People have been trying to go virtual for a long time. But with the pandemic, we really accelerated that. So we moved everything digital, and it really reshaped the way we train and the way we learn. Now, not everybody loved that. Actually, most people didn't, because they forced us into formats and learning in ways that we weren't used to, and we didn't do it well. So what we're starting to see is a shift in strategies for teaching and learning, with a focus on real learner engagement and trying to get away from one-way content, getting away from those sage on the stage webinars where you're just got a talking head. And we're seeing corporate adoption. We're using it for upskilling and reskilling and onboarding. But we need that because that's the way our businesses are going. So what we're starting to see is a lot more adoption of microlearning and on-demand content. We're really trying to make sure that all learners have the same type of technology. I remember teaching some sessions where people were in Europe and the United States and in Africa. And we were running some pre-recorded videos through the live sessions. The people in Africa didn't have enough bandwidth to maintain that. They just didn't happen to have it. So that instruction was, just watch it later. You don't need to watch it here. But do you see how that might pull people away and disenfranchise them? So one of the big trends is making sure everybody has the right technology, the right tools, so they can access all of this. Okay. And we're going to see a lot of hybrid work and learning integration. The idea is we don't know when learning ends and work starts, and that means a lot more collaboration. The things that are going to impact this are this kind of iffy back to work initiatives, where this trend or this hopeful trend where people go back to the corporate offices instead of working remotely. We don't know where that's going to end. I think that's going to have an impact on hybrid. And we also have a lot of different generations demanding different things. Younger generations, the digital natives, really have a expectation that this stuff is going to happen online, and it's going to be quick and it's going to be good. So that's going to have an impact on what's moving forward.
Okay. And Connie, from a instructional design perspective, what considerations should educators keep in mind to effectively engage both an in-person and a remote learner?
It seems that people may not realize that the groups are not mutually exclusive. So one of the first things is to make sure that everyone is engaged, both remote learners and in person. I've heard them called roomies and zoomies. Make sure that both groups are connected and addressed. So that's another way of looking at inclusive learning, so that the activities may be best integrated as remote first. Some people will just think treating the whole group as remote allows the actually remote people to actually see the faces and who the individuals are in the in-person class, because I know it can be kind of difficult. I've been in both situations where you just see a room full of people and you can't really tell what's going on. You may not be able to hear them well. So sometimes facilitators prefer to just take a remote first approach. And then when you're setting up groups, it's helpful to pre-assign so that you can include remote participants and in-person participants in the same group so that they can really interact with each other. Those are a few things to keep in mind.
Can I add to that, Jeff?
Please.
So I think our design needs to be intentional, don't you, Connie? Where we're not just taking a class that's face-to-face and saying now it's hybrid. We need to redesign and relook at that class to make sure it works in that environment. Hope is not really a design strategy. We don't want to just hope it's going to work, because that can really reduce the effectiveness of what we're trying to do. And we need to keep in mind that blended learning is now part of this strategy. The idea of those decision support tools and micro learning and on-demand video can be part of this and make the hybrid learning design more impactful. I mean, I think we've all experienced hybrid classes that felt like more of an afterthought for the remote learners. And we don't want that to happen.
One other thing I wanted to say is to not make assumptions. It happened to me recently where I assumed everyone knew what the breakout room was. So I assigned people to a breakout room. And when I went in to visit, they were just, I gave full instructions, but they didn't know what to do in a breakout room because there was no leader or facilitator there. They were supposed to speak among themselves. They just weren't used to it. So we really have to know our audience and not make assumptions.
Yeah. Well, with that being said, going back to where Jennifer was saying everything has to pretty much be blended now, because we have 30% of workers remote. We have 30% workers doing a hybrid or coming in once or twice a week, right? And then we have, I think it's roughly 7% is the study that I saw the other day, is that like strictly just stay in the office the entire time. So with that being said, Connie, are there design strategies that you found most effective in fostering this kind of blended and hybrid engagement among learners?
The very first thing I find that's so important is on the emotional level. People are often kind of, not everyone, of course, but there's a certain percentage of people who are just a little bit uptight when they're with a group. They feel awkward speaking out. They're just uncomfortable. And the very first thing I like to do is try to do something so that people can meet each other. And that it's amazing how much that brings a level of comfort to people. If you're speaking in a breakout group of 3 or 4 people, you actually like kind of have a few friends there now, and it just makes you more comfortable. So that's a design strategy I love to use, is getting small groups together to speak about something that's not super complex, but it's also not stupid, where they can tell you're just doing it for, as an icebreaker. It's just something real, something they can evaluate. I'm often teaching visual design, so maybe they'll give their opinions about a design. It's something where they can feel comfortable. And I've noticed that when they come back to the group, they're more willing to speak. And another strategy is to really show that you value everyone's opinion. You can even ask for opposite opinions to show that it's okay to disagree. Those are a few things where you're really treating remote and in person 100% the same. You're actually asking people, what did you think of that? How did you like that? What impact did that have on you? I was just going to say one other thing I really like is variety. Not so much variety that people are constantly confused. So it is a fine line, but enough variety where maybe they have a little assignment to do on their own. Maybe they have, depending if you're doing a full day or a half day, maybe they have an assignment to do together as a group or an activity, and some group discussion or group collaboration. So, polls, quizzes. So there are some variety, but not enough to make their heads spin. Those are 3 things that I like to do.
Well, with that being said, it's all about bringing the face-to-face, what you would do in an everyday environment, to this mixture that we're in right now.
Yeah.
So I love how you explained that there. And Jennifer, back to you. Are there any practical tools, platforms that you have proven success in maintaining consistent engagement, or in the hybrid setting? Is there anything like you use at your go-to?
Well, the one thing that I really want to suggest, and I wish I can enforce and insist on, is that everyone is working individually on a laptop or a computer, even if they're in the face-to-face environment. That allows us to integrate a whole lot of other tools on a very equal level. And that allows people that are in the face-to-face environment to see questions coming in via chat, for example. And it creates a community between the face-to-face learners and the remote learners. So everyone on a laptop, they can all whiteboard, they can all chat, they can all participate in video. That doesn't mean they can't work together when they're face-to-face. Maybe they're in their own breakout group, but that's a way to integrate the groups together. And it's very simple. There's also a lot of engagement tools we can get outside of the virtual classroom. We've all seen Kahoot and Mentimeter and Bcast and Poll Everywhere. Those types of real-time feedback tools really can boost participation. It breaks the monotony. But like Connie said, I think earlier, we don't want to just make it, okay, we have to have a poll every 5 minutes. It needs to move the content along and mean something. So if you use an idea board in Bcast, for example, pull those ideas in later. And that's got to be part of the design. Refer back to the idea board and how does that impact what people just did in the breakout room or what their action plan is going to be. And allow time for people to sit and think about what they've learned. I think when we go into these virtual environments, we're so concerned that we're going to lose people that we just keep moving through the content. And that doesn't allow that time out our brain needs to absorb what we've learned. I can watch television on a given night and watch it for 2 hours and the next day not remember anything that I saw, even though I chose to spend my free time, my valuable free time watching that television show. I can't remember the content. That's because I wasn't fully invested, maybe, and I wasn't getting a mental break in between. So we need to build that time out. So there's a lot of different tools that we can use to engage learners using the technology. and all managed by their LMS, the participation tools. It keeps everyone involved in the learning.
Well, and I wanted to go back to one point when you said laptop only. When you say that, because I want to make sure that the audience understands, that could also be the iPad. That also
Yeah.
could be your iPhone or your smartphone of some sort. Because as we all know, we're all on the go constantly, and we're in an airport or we're in different areas. So when we say laptop or computer, we have a computer with us all the time,
Mhm.
and that's where that. And would you agree with that from that aspect?
Yes, but right. So
Mhm.
so tools work differently
Mm.
on a desktop computer versus a phone, and those are probably the extremes, right?
Mhm.
So if you need to make sure that the tools you're going to use work in those environments. So BCAS, does it work, and how does it integrate for the people in the virtual setting versus the people face to face? As long as you test it and know how it works, then you can use it. I think an iPad would normally work, but you need to have an idea and let your learners know ahead of time what the expectations are.
Mhm.
Bring something that at least does this, and then get them logged on and make it. If you don't make it important for the people face to face, then they won't take it as important. They'll disregard it, or they won't fully participate, and that can disengage the virtual learners. So whatever you design, whatever technologies that you insist on or decide to use, it has to work for everyone. Otherwise, you've got two separate groups that aren't connecting.
Yeah.
Cool. And I just wanted to have that clarified on that aspect of it, so we could really get the audience to understand where we were coming from that aspect of it. But now I kind of want to go to leadership and like the manager's approach to hybrid teams. And this one's for you, Jennifer. Um, what are some common challenges leaders face when managing a hybrid team, and how do they ensure uh, equality, equability, equal participation among the team members, and equal engagement?
This is dating me, but a long time ago, I remember a commercial, and I think it was MCI back at the time, where there were a bunch of people around a conference table, and there was one person on a speakerphone, and they were trying to engage that person in the conference. And of course, this was an MCI telecommunications commercial, and it was perfect. That person was fully engaged. But we all knew in the reality is at the end of the meeting, we'd say, Sam, did you have any questions? Right? I mean, it was very hard to pull that one person in. And I think that that's something I want to keep in mind when we're talking about leadership, hybrid teams, and hybrid learning, that the challenges they have to face are that communication between the in-office versus the remote staff. It's very easy to pay more attention to who's in front of you. So how do you treat these groups equitably and equally?
Mhm.
Because what you can wind up is that marginalization of the remote workers. If I wasn't there for the meeting, or if you can't see me in real life, maybe I won't get that promotion, or maybe I missed out on the office gossip. So the challenge for leaders is balancing that live communication, the self-paced communication. So there's a lot of ways to address this. I use a very standard communication channel. We all have something like Skype or Slack or Teams or something where we can keep in communication. What we do at InSync is we've got a couple of different channels. One is kind of the water cooler, where people say, oh, how's the new baby? And how's the weather in Baltimore? Those types of things. Just a morning, afternoon, and evening sort of catch up. But we also have, here's a tech support channel, or here's a client channel, where we can get more immediate communication. So this keeps everyone on the same page. And Connie mentioned earlier this remote first mindset, and I think that applies to leaders in a hybrid team as well. A digital first approach to meetings, to resources, to communication. So if my weekly meetings or my annual reviews are conducted in Zoom for my virtual workers, why not do those for the face-to-face workers as well, or at least partially? So we're comparing apples to apples when they're in our head. All those tools like Bcast and Mural and Notion, that allow us to collaborate, bring those tools in and teach people how to use them. Don't assume that just because somebody's 27 years old and grew up in that gaming generation, that they know how to collaborate with others on a shared whiteboard. And what we need to do with all this is just promote kind of equal growth opportunities for everybody. So mentorship and leadership and meetings and opportunities for more education, if it's perceived as equal, and if the manager is really trying to make it equal, then I think you'll get more loyalty and maybe reduce the turnover in your organization. I mean, think about a leadership style that doesn't cater to everybody that's all around the world, but only focuses on the people in front of them. Wouldn't that be disengaging?
Yeah. And, when we were back in, with the pandemic, that forced us to separate and do what we're doing now. And then when the pandemic ended, we got that mixed model. And when we were all in person, I mean, I specifically remember this, is that you got the, the tap on the door of your office of like, hey, can I bounce this idea off you, or can I do that? And what we need to do as now a new community, a remote and in-person community, is that tap on the door is now a ding, or
Right.
hey, are you around right now so I can bounce an idea off you? Can you get on a call?
So just to build on what you're saying, Jeff. So just like in hybrid learning, where we need to design for the entire audience, no matter where they are, we need to design our office interactions for the entire audience, not create one set of rules for the in-person team and one set of rules for the remote team.
Mm-hmm. And when you find that, I mean, I find that as the hardest challenge, right? Because your brain is trained to do, I'm in person all the time. If I want to talk to John, I knock on the door and I say, hey, John, versus what we're doing, what we were, forced into, and what we like to do now, is remote and hybrid. It's more of like, would you say it's not more of an effort, but it takes more of a mind shift?
I think it does right now. I
Yeah.
mean, when the telephone was first introduced, that was hard to adopt. People couldn't understand how they would interact with people when they couldn't see them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it became just part of the way we lived and interacted and communicated.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we are now. We understand that there's a need to communicate virtually, but we have a desire for that face-to-face in-person connection.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's balancing those things and knowing when one format, one type of interaction might be more effective than others as well. But yeah, I do think that for managers trying to do the best that they can, it's still easier for them to behave in a way that they know.
Right. Well, and to bring Connie back into this, because we've been hogging it a little bit too long, how can instructional materials be designed to support instructors and facilitators in creating inclusive environments for these hybrid audiences?
Mm-hmm. I think it might depend if the instructional designer is separate, is not the facilitator, so it's just creating these for someone else. I believe the instructional designer needs to do a very thorough audience analysis and to convey that information to the facilitators and instructors so they really understand how the purposes and the ways that they're going to engage the audience. Because some activities may or may not make sense, without really knowing the audience. So conveying that is really important. Another thing is to ensure that the facilitators really get and understand the technology. I know from experience, there's nothing worse than being up there and the technology gets messed up and you don't know what to do. And then the audience has to help you. A little embarrassing. Um, but it also breaks the flow. Forget about who cares if you're humiliated? The most important thing is it stops the flow of the engagement and the instruction. So I think it's very important that they know the technology. And in an ideal world, there's always a technical person on hand who can help for any, mishaps, internet being down, all kinds of the crazy things that can happen. And then I love instructor manuals that actually have a script. I'm not saying someone should be, or bullet points of instructions for the best ways to communicate to the audience, what the next activity is going to be, what the instruction is all about. Just, you don't want someone standing there reading it, of course. But you do want to give the facilitators some type of support so they're not just surprised and then maybe ways that they can get immediate feedback, because if they're experienced facilitators, they should be able to adapt in the moment and be flexible to things that may or may not be working. You can have a very reticent audience, and you have to, if you've been facilitating for a long time, you might have to come up with something really quick so that you make people feel comfortable. So there are just, I guess it really all comes down to being super prepared, really helping the facilitator become super prepared. And I can tell Jennifer has a few more
I
things.
do. I mean, just everything you say makes just so much sense. I think that we still rely too much on just the slides to guide the conversation, and the content is usually not on the slides. It's in the activities, it's in the conversations.
Yeah.
And we need to be very prepared to do that, and very quick to just kind of be able to adapt. You need to know your content and your technology enough as a facilitator to adapt when things don't work. And in a hybrid environment, you need to be able to recognize that it might not be working in the remote team, but it is working face to face. So we need to give those tips on how to engage both sets of the audience to make sure everyone's having a comparable experience.
Yeah.
Well, with that, I'd love to know how you both have done this in the real world. And if Jennifer, let's start with you on this. Can you share any specific case study examples within Sync that successfully implemented, the hybrid learning model, and what were the key takeaways out of it? And were there any challenges or difficulties in any of these?
Well, everything's always got challenges, right? So absolutely. Let's talk about a global consulting firm transitioning from, like we're talking about, traditional just face-to-face operations to this hybrid work and learning model. So these were the three objectives for that firm. The first was equitable engagement. So we need to make sure both or everyone is motivated and wants to participate and informed about what's going on. Their second objective was skill alignment. And what that meant to them was everything is a consistent delivery across teams, no matter where you were, how you were learning, or what office you were in the world. And then cultural cohesion. That was their third objective. So how do you get a consistent company and learning culture among this whole dispersed workforce, no matter where they are? So their program was a hybrid. So they've got live virtual classrooms. They included self-paced e-learning. They included face-to-face learning and real-time coaching. So live content, self-paced content, and coaching around it. So there was a lot of emphasis on accessibility because we had multiple languages. So subtitles for live lessons and for recorded sessions. And those could be accessed by the face-to-face people as well, of course. And those subtitles might help them if it was taught in a language that wasn't their first language. translation if needed for not just the delivery, but for the self-paced materials, including the facilitator materials, and a lot of different formats. So we started to create a blend. So there was, instead of a 20-minute lecture during a live class, maybe that was a video that everybody could watch on demand, even if it was within the timing for the live class. Just stop listening to the facilitator and let's watch the video. So we needed a lot of tech support for that. There was a producer in every session, often a multilingual producer that was managing the technology. We talked earlier about, well, can't we use phones? Can't we use iPads? Can't we, do we have to use a desktop? Well, if we're going to mix that technology up, which we certainly can, we need a producer tech support there to support that. And we need to keep monitoring it to see if people really were engaged. And just keep, because that is a problem. We don't know that somebody is not engaged if they're not if they're not participating. So we need to keep that feedback going back and forth. So they created this very flexible program design to accommodate where people were, how they were learning, and what their work-life realities were really all about. They added those coaching and mentorship to add to make it more personalized, an inclusive culture, continually improving the content, not just saying one and done. So what they got after it rolled out and got out of pilot, they got a 30% increase in employee engagement in this program that we used for the initial program within 6 months. The learners said that they got higher skill development based on level 1 and level 2 evaluations. And everybody thought that their retention was better. So what this says to me is that a well-structured hybrid learning model not only impacts engagement, but impacts the company culture. So if we think about the way people are working now with in a hybrid environment where some people are in the office, some people are on the road, some people are working from home. And we model our training programs and design our training programs to represent what they're actually doing in their work. We might be helping them to do their work better, because we're not just teaching them leadership content or how to use Excel. We're also teaching them how to interact and collaborate in the workspace, which is one of the major challenges that supervisors are mentioning, is how do we get that collaboration across these different engagement styles?
Okay. Well, Connie, do you have anything to add from a visual design strategy aspect of that, or any case studies that you might have from there?
From a visual design perspective, in that type of environment that Jennifer was just describing, it's kind of the same foundation rules as visual design anywhere, and that is your visuals have to have an instructional purpose, and that goes everywhere from explaining a concept, making it concrete, visualizing data, revealing the characters in a scenario, even just what people call eye candy, as long as it's relevant and motivational. And a lot of times the aesthetic sense of learning materials can affect how motivated people are and how much they learn if they're just nice looking. So that's kind of amazing, that there've been some research on that. I think a lot of times people may be kind of stuck, like, how I'd like to dress this up a little. You don't want to just dress it up. You want it to have some meaning. There are visual metaphors, visual analogies, diagrams, graphs, photos. There's just so many ways to express and enhance learning through visuals. And then we all have to take bandwidth into consideration. You may need some quick displaying vector graphics that are just icons because you've got people living in areas where the internet is kind of rough or not very good. So we have to keep that into take that into consideration for our diverse audiences. We want to be able to create a visual hierarchy and make sure that people know where to look first, to be conscious of that, to make sure that we're not using color, we're not using color as the only source of information so that everything is accessible to a completely wide audience, high contrast, and then following the general typography rules, enough spacing, fonts that are large enough for everyone to be able to access the materials and see them and read them, everyone who is sighted. And then we need the alternatives for those who are not sighted.
You're speaking my language as a art director for 25 years in advertising, and knowing the proper amount of white space, the proper amount of text that needs to be around, and leading and kerning and sans serif versus serif fonts. So yeah, I fully understand where that comes from, and the challenges that comes into it, because with visuals and reading, people see visuals and relate visuals quicker in their head than they do reading text. Not that text is not important, but if you have the combination, your retention is higher and you'll remember it quicker. And I find that in my everyday. I find that in branding lessons, and also in designing any kind of pieces in today's market, and especially in today's instant gratification age. It has to be quick. And in advertising, when I was working at Leo Burnett, it's the 6-second rule. You have 6 seconds to engage a person, to have them respond to you, or to remember it. And that is the same in instructional design as it is in TV design, which is what I did for years, or graphic design, which is what I also did for years. So yes, I fully, I'm digging what you're dropping right there, Connie. So that helps a lot.
Well, I'd like to add, we're so reliant on video now, which we weren't pre-pandemic. And people are trying to rely on just the video to convey the entire message. Mm-hmm. And I think we're starting to ignore what else is on the screen. And so that's important to remember, that sometimes you want to focus what's on the screen and not necessarily on people's faces, which could be more distracting. So know when to turn the video on and off, or and to use it very strategically. So when it's going to make a point, look at me right now, listen to what I'm saying, as opposed to let's look at the content, or let's use this micro learning and I'll tell you how you're going to use it later. So part of the facilitator's job is to manage what people are looking at. And whatever they're looking at needs to be a strong message.
That's a good point. That's a really good
point. And since we have research on our video, on use of video, people can go to our website and check that out as well. That just dropped in February. So just as a final question for you both, and Connie, let's begin with you. What's one key strategy organizations should focus on for future-proofing their hybrid programs?
One thing I see missing from so many programs is just having a system in place for feedback and evaluation. What we want to do is get immediate feedback. That's one level. But then continuing to get feedback and looking at the key metrics to see if the hybrid training, actually changed behaviors and improved performance at work. That's the goal. So some of our evaluation is going to happen immediately, but some of it is going to happen in 3 months and 6 months, and maybe you won't even know for a year. And to really complete that feedback loop so that we can continually make training experiences and hybrid training experiences, better and more effective.
Jennifer, do you have anything to add for that?
Yeah, I do. But I always have something to add, Jeff.
Right.
What we really need to do, and this hasn't changed in 30 years, develop a strong learning culture, but include that in the remote learning culture as well. We want continuous learning, continuous engagement, technology integration that mimics the way we work as well. This matters because really our lives are getting more and more digital every day. No matter what happens with the return to office strategy, hybrid learning is here to stay. Most organizations have developed some level of hybrid, so we need to be able to do this well. We need to value ongoing development, but engagement is key. Engagement of our learners, engagement of our leaders. We need to make sure that our remote workers have content that's designed intentionally to engage them, to make sure that they're motivated to learn and they don't feel like second-class citizens when they're participating in any type of learning activity.
Yep. Right. Well, with that, I think that's a really good wrap up. And I want to thank both Jennifer and Connie for sharing their valuable insights on hybrid learning. It's clear that as we move forward with 2025, embracing these strategies will be crucial for affecting education and training. For our listeners eager to dive deeper, we invite you to sign up for our upcoming webinars and explore the essential bundle for hybrid training that is available at insynctraining.com. Thank you for tuning in to Modern Learning on the Air, and until next time, thank you. Thank you for tuning into Modern Learning on the Air. For all your training and services needs, visit us at insynctraining.com. And don't forget to sign up for our monthly webinars, where we cover key topics and trends in the learning and development space. Until next time, keep learning and keep growing.